Good evening, I'm Shane Jones, leading the news at 7. The Integrity in Public Life Commission being established by the government will be empowered to do more than summons people to be questioned. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Dale Marshall says the commission's staff will be vested with investigative powers. He was speaking in Parliament on the second reading of the Integrity Bill in Public Life Bill 2018. Mr. Marshall says the issue is being addressed early by the new administration to demonstrate its seriousness and commitment to integrity and accountability.
The new Integrity and Public Life Commission will actually have investigative staff who will be charged with the responsibility not of snooping into people's business, but who will be charged with the responsibility of looking into and investigating issues as and when they arise relating to corruption in public life. So that rather than just sending you a sterile summons, which based on the Public Accounts Committee experience, the people might decide they ain't coming anywhere. In this instance, nobody has to wait for you to come anywhere. They will have the power to go to licensing authority as we have and see who owns what.
The Attorney General says the government also intends to enact sunshine legislation, also referred to as Freedom on Information laws.
That is part of what has hindered us as an opposition, sir. Because we were never able to write to a government department and say, let us see the position on this compliant application. Let us see what submissions are made, because we have no authority in law to do so. And on this side, we have recognized that with a new Barbadian electorate, we have to treat with them in the way that they not only demand, but in the way that is a moral imperative. And so we are going to, as quickly as possible, bring to this chamber legislation which will see information in relation to public process and public activity being public.
Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, Marcia Cattle, believes a high level of corruption was one of the reasons for Barbados' weak economic growth over the past decade. She says the link between corruption and anemic growth has long been established through research.
Those studies found certain things. One of those was that more corrupt countries have lower levels of growth in their GDP. And so there are all kinds of reasons for the lack of growth over the last 10 years. But I would dare suggest that the high levels of corruption was one of them.
Minister Cattle also notes that a high level of corruption acts as a deterrent investment.
Corruption acts almost as a tax on foreign direct investment, and we know how that functions. We know that if someone is coming into a country seeking to make an investment of a certain size, but in order to have that business facilitated, they need to make a payment that is also of a certain size, that if that person has the kind of integrity that we would want to encourage, that they may choose to go elsewhere. And so the country suffers from the high burden of that tax because corruption acts as a tax on investment.
The seemingly overwhelming problem of sargassum seaweed covering Barbados' coastline could have been resolved if only the previous administration had empowered young entrepreneurs eager to take the challenge. This suggestion from Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, Kirk Humphrey. Mr. Humphrey says there are people willing to make productive use of the significant amount of seaweed that has blanketed some of the island's beaches.
The first time it came was in 2010, 2011. And you would believe, sir, in 2018, some 78 years later, that this is the first time it is here, that a country has no real response to it. That you have a number of young, promising business people in this country, whose names I can't call in here, some good people who just wanted a little help from the government to be able to turn that seaweed into fertilizer and into energy. Brilliant young Barbadian minds in need of a little support, and got none.
Leader of the opposition, Bishop Joseph Atherley, is taking issue with the fines attached with respect to the proposed integrity in public life legislation. He's questioned the seriousness of the new administration as he likened the fines to a slap on the wrist. He wants Barbados to guard against being labeled as a country where corruption is rife.
Corruption cannot be seen in localized terms. Corruption has to be understood in terms of its potential to reach across borders, and persons from across borders reaching into our jurisdiction to perpetuate their acts of devilishness and to perpetrate criminal activity. And therefore, this matter of corruption for us must have a local focus while we remain on guard for how we may here be corrupted from people outside.
Bishop Atherley suggests campaign financing is another area requiring attention. The opposition leader wants Barbados to go even further and establish the position of a contractor general.
But we need a monitoring mechanism. We need an oversight mechanism. We can improve by providing for the position of contractor general. Give us the capacity to review and to monitor and to investigate matters relative to the award of public contracts. We need to ensure compliance with the terms of those contracts. We need to ensure that the culture of deficiencies obtaining around those contracts after implementation is curtailed.
Newly appointed ambassador to CARICOM, David Comishong, is rejecting the notion that his appointment is merely a political pick. During a media conference at his Clement Payne chambers in the city, he defended the appointment. And as Kareem Smith reports, Mr. Comishong's positions on critical issues like the construction of the Hyatt Hotel and others have not changed.
Ambassador Comishong says his willingness to accept Prime Minister Motley's appointment is a mere continuation of his service to the country. This, he says, has always been his motive from his appointment to the Senate under an Errol Barrow-led government to the Task Force on Reparations under the Frundle-Stewart administration.
There are some things that transcend narrow partisan politics, and we must always keep that in mind in Barbados. The nation is higher and bigger than the political party, and the highest office in the land is the office of citizen.
Multiple questions have been raised about the new ambassador's appointment. Opposition Senator Caswell Franklin recently accused Prime Minister Motley of going wild with power over her appointments of Mr. Comishong and Communications Director Non-National Charles Jung. Another concern has been Mr. Comishong's court battle with the previous administration over the construction of the Hyatt. Mr. Comishong is assuring Barbadians that his position on the Hyatt has not changed.
To build it in a situation where our sewage system has collapsed, and there are questions as to whether our sewage capacity can handle these additional burdens. How could any sensible administration believe that you don't need an environmental impact assessment? How could any sensible administration believe that in 2018, the people of Barbados are not entitled to come to town hall meetings to ask questions about such a project?
Aside from the Hyatt, the ambassador will be approaching government to advance a settlement to the Archcot and Campus Trends cases. While acknowledging his role as a political and social activist will now take on a different character, he promises to act in the interest of the public at all times. Kareem Smith, CBC News.
The health minister says a number of issues have to be addressed before 2 of the island's polyclinics can begin planned 24-hour operations. According to Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, the decision, which affects the Randall Phillips and Sir Winston Scott polyclinics, has been welcomed by Barbadians. He notes staffing is one of the areas to be rectified before the move becomes a reality.
Doctors, etc. And it is not only extended hours, but an expansion of services in that the 2 polyclinics outlined have to be able to provide dispensing and diagnostic services, radiology services, and so on. And so we have to get all of those things in place to make it really worthwhile. Because remember, this intention here is to cover for 25% of the persons who now go to QEH, accident emergency, that are not urgent care patients.
Acting Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw has revealed the Ministry of Education is to meet with professionals to address violence in schools. She says solutions must be sought to fix root causes and reduce the impact on the teaching and learning process. Ms. Bradshaw's comments came during an address to an educational conference hosted by the Barbados Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools at St. Anne's Fort. The conference is being held under the theme Educational Leadership in Challenging Times.
We have realized the challenges you are experiencing and have started the process of addressing some of them. My government has proposed an increase in the number of guidance counselors, safety officers, and social workers across the school system. We will also address violence and bullying by facilitating anger management resolution classes. We believe that students must also take ownership of their own behaviors, and one of the ways in which this can occur is by having them actively participate in identifying their weaknesses and seek to strengthen them with the guidance of appropriately trained professionals.
Ms. Bradshaw says her ministry intends to work closely with the Transport Board to ensure a timely bus service for Barbadian school children. The Education Minister also accepted an invitation to meet with the Barbados Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools to hear their concerns. Meanwhile, Acting President of BAPS, Juanita Wade, says the association is looking forward to meeting with the new Education Minister to discuss the way forward. She also sees the education conference as timely.
This evening marks a new era, one in which principals and administrators have taken a decisive move towards enhancing the management of our schools in a rapidly changing environment. Certainly, this demonstrates to society that we are positioning ourselves to better manage our schools as we aim to prepare our students for the demands of the 21st century. It should certainly signal to the Minister and to the Ministry that we as professionals have taken the initiative to further develop responses to issues which are becoming of increasing concern to us, the Ministry, and to society at large.
Portfolio Manager in Education at the Caribbean Development Bank, Ida Mae Denny, is stressing that if principals are to deal successfully with issues facing schools, they must have an interest and aptitude for leading.
Some of us may find it difficult to believe, but there are persons in the system who have absolutely no interest in leading a school. There are others who don't have the capacity to do so, but both types end up in leadership positions nonetheless. Why? For the simple reason that it is the only way to get a salary increase once you have reached the top of the teacher's scale.
Ms. Denny welcomed the recent move to establish the position of master teacher.
As was the intention when this was first mooted in the late 1990s, when the Honorable Prime Minister was Minister of Education. It will keep persons whose only interest is teaching in the classroom where they truly belong, adequately compensating them for being masters of their craft.
Newly appointed Minister of Innovation, Science and Sport Technology, Senator Kay McConney, believes Barbados is ready for the digital stage. She says her ministry will be using technology and the abundance of skills to facilitate that transformation.
It is an exciting time for us, and while many people see it as a challenging time, we see it as a time for fantastic opportunity, for us to make savings, for us to be more efficient, for us to be able to drive growth, using technology as an enabler and using the innovation of our people as a very important input to that process.
As Argentina reaches out to Barbados, it is relying on its culture as an engine of integration and dialogue. Barbadians will gain some insight into the South American country during the 2018 Argentinian Film Festival. It will feature 3 award-winning films, a drama, family comedy, and thriller, produced and directed by world-acclaimed Argentinian filmmakers. The festival opened with a reception at the Errol Barrow Center for Creative Imagination. Argentine Ambassador to Barbados, Gustavo Martinez Pandiani, says the event is the first of many cultural events organized to celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations between his country and the island.
Argentine cinema, its directors and actors have always stood out, winning numerous international awards, which include 2 Best Foreign Language Film Oscars, La Historia Oficial in 1986 and El Secreto de sus Ojos in 2010. Our cinema reflects our history, our idiosyncrasies, our dreams, and also it reflects our shortcomings. Our films are a faithful mirror of our society.
The ambassador also wants to see Barbadian films screened in Argentina.
For this purpose, I invite you to work together with us to make sure that your films are screened in the Mar del Plata Festival, the most prestigious film event in Latin America. The Minister of Culture, Mr. King, we already are talking about this, and I hope we can do it soon. Additionally, I want to emphasize that this opening reception initiates a long journey of commemoration. Indeed, the Argentine Embassy has organized an ambitious program of cultural activities for 2018, all of them free of charge and open to the community.
And that 2018 Argentine Film Festival closes tomorrow. Meanwhile, Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Trade, Sandra Husbands, says relations between Barbados and Argentina have deepened since 1968. She says the 2 nations have worked together on a number of areas over the past 50 years.
With a marked enhancement in collaboration in the areas of agriculture and food security, education and language training, trade and investment, and cultural development. Over the years, our most active engagement has been in the area of technical cooperation. As recently as 2 months ago, the government of Argentina, through the offices of its embassy in Barbados, convened a regional cooperation workshop in Barbados.
The coordination of the military within CARICOM, including those who render assistance in times of disaster, remains a priority for the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. For Executive Director Ronald Jackson, he says it is important that the entities work in unison to maximize the limited resources of the region. He made the call during a Caribbean Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief Seminar at the Hilton Hotel. Mr. Jackson says resilience remains at the heart of SEDIMA's strategies.
Governance, citizen participation, capacity building, these are all some of the areas that we have identified as going to be critical to land this resilience agenda on. And we think that you, our partners, our colleagues, are more than willing to join us on that particular journey over the next 3 to 5 years.
Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Gail Francis Vaughan, says the region shares a common anxiety this time and wants requisite departments adequately funded. She says no Caribbean nation is alone when hurricanes strike, adding the new government has high on its agenda the development of resilience and support for the regional effort.
In terms of preparedness and resilience, we have legislation, we have regional integration systems, we have the fantastic support that we get from all of you. I will take this opportunity to recognize U.S. Southern Command. We have worked together on a number of projects, not least of all is the headquarters building for SEDIMA.
Jamaica's Court of Appeal has granted leave for new evidence to be introduced into the case involving dancehall entertainer Vybz Kartel. The artist was convicted in 2014 for the murder of Clive Lizard Williams. More in this TVJ report.
In 2014, Adisha Palmer, popularly known as Vybz Kartel, Sean Campbell, known as Sean Storm, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John were convicted for the 2011 murder of Clive Lizard Williams. Vybz Kartel was sentenced to life in prison and has to serve 35 years before being eligible for parole. The Court of Appeal ruled on Monday that lawyers representing the men were allowed to introduce fresh evidence relating to the case.
We think that this is a great day for justice in Jamaica.
Bert Samuels, who represents Sean Storm, summarized some of the arguments made by the legal team.
On the application of QC Nita Robertson, she got the statements that are being used in the Hertfordshire Parish Court, where the same DPP's office is prosecuting the juror, and there are statements to say that the jurors were listened to the tape recordings by the foreman juror in the jury room, which is scandalous. That ought not to have happened.
Defense attorneys argued that the trial judge should have discharged the jury and declare a mistrial once the matter was brought to the judge's attention. One of the jurors was arrested and charged following allegations that he approached the foreman to swing the verdict in Kartel's favor. That case is still before the Halfway Tree Parish Court.
It may amaze the public to know that Sean Campbell was not allowed to go in the judge's chambers when matters regarding the bribing of a juror was being decided on, and the judge took a decision in chambers behind the backs of the accused persons.
And the Court of Appeal has reduced the 3-week period it initially set aside to hear submissions. Since submissions were made in writing, Justice Dennis Morrison said starting Monday, July 16, each appellant will be given 1 day to make a case. Mr. Samuels said his submission was roughly 140 pages and took issue with the response from the prosecution led by Jeremy Taylor.
Is that 140 pages of arguments, and the DPP has made 1.5 pages of response. That to me is telling. It shows that they have no response to what we have put forward before this Court of Appeal. What that is going to lead to, and I'm no prophet here, I know what is going to happen. He's going to come to court and seek to go outside of his response and catch us by surprise, which we call in law try to ambush us. It won't happen in this appeal.
Sports Night is up next, but before we get there, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
If possible, after a hurricane, take photographs of any resultant damage to your home. Cooperators General Insurance, helping you to be prepared this hurricane season.